Up next, we have an incredibly important topic of DAX measures. Now, by definition, measures are DAX formulas that are used to generate new calculated values. So, a couple of important things to note about measures. Like calculated columns, they reference entire tables or columns. So again, no A1 style or grid references like you would use in Excel. But unlike calculated columns, the measure values aren't actually visible within your tables. In fact, you can only see measure values within a visualization, like a chart or a matrix. So for those of you with Excel backgrounds, think of measures the same way that you would think about a calculated field in an Excel pivot. The calculated field doesn't exist anywhere else. You can't see it in tables, right? You can only see it within the Excel pivot table itself. And measures in Power BI operate the same way. You can only see them when you drag them into the values field of a visualization. So we just saw that calculated columns are evaluated based on row context. Measures are evaluated based on filter context. And it's super important to understand the difference between these two. And it's a little bit of a tricky concept to wrap your head around initially. And what I mean by this is that these measures, the values that they take, constantly recalculate whenever the fields or filters around them change. So if you drag a new field or dimension into the row or column labels of a matrix, or if you apply new filters to a report, in each of those cases, you're changing the filter context and you're changing the value that that measure should return. So to summarize, and as a rule of thumb, you're going to use measures and not calculated columns when a single row isn't going to be able to give you an answer. In other words, use measures when you want to aggregate. Remember that measures are used to create numerical calculated values that you can analyze within the values fields of your report visuals. So if we actually take a look at the report pane in our AdventureWorks file, you'll see that we've actually already been using measures. We just didn't know that we were using them quite yet. And the way we used these measures was simply by adding them in to the values field within this matrix visual. And if we click on each one of these, you can actually see this check mark next to the aggregation type. So this tells us that we're actually looking at the sum for this particular value, which is the order quantity. And what we've done here is create something called an implicit measure just by dragging it in here, right? And Power BI is smart enough to know that it needs to auto aggregate that field in some way. So up next, we're going to dig into implicit versus explicit measures and start getting a little bit deeper into how DAX actually works.